This is your host, Stephen Sargeant. We have kind of a Canadian flavor here on the Around the Coin podcast. We talked to Audrey Nesbitt, who's the founder and CEO of Spinovate Tech, and she's also leading something called Bloomly, which is helping companies go through the whole NFT building phase from start to finish, including things like KYC integration for all my fellow compliance professionals. We go deep into marketing and what's going on with things like hackathons and how to really build out and market some of these L2 protocols and make them differentiate. If you're a payment, text, and crypto, she gives a lot of really great advice on how to better market your product and find product market fit within the industry. This is a great episode for anyone that's building, wants more customers, more users. She gives us all the tea. Hope you enjoy this one. This is Stephen Sargeant, host of the Around the Coin podcast. We have a little bit of a Canadian flair here. We have Audrey Nesbitt, who's the founder and CEO of Spinovate Tech, but is also just a marketing genius when it comes to Web3. Audrey, why don't you introduce yourself? Let us know who you are. And then we're going to go deep into your background and talk about all the amazing things that you're doing at Bloomly and with Spinovate.
Hey, so as he said, Audrey Nesbitt, and I have been in the emerging tech Web3 space since 2013. So I'm considered a senior and actually OG. I think the proper term is OG. I say senior. I've been in marketing. The bulk of my career has been actually for large US law firms. And I got into Bitcoin in 2013 and just fell in love with the space and fell in love with the people in the space. Just all the innovation, the excitement. And so I started marketing in the Web3 space in 2014.
That's amazing. Now you're talking about big law firms. What was like the digital marketing era? You were back there in 2001 to 2011. Like what was the major breakthrough? Like AI seems to be the major breakthrough when it comes to marketing and anything digital now. What was the major breakthrough over 20 years ago that these law firms were like, hey, this is what we need to do? Was it like, were they starting their own blog? Like, what were they doing back then?
No, so when I got into it, it was still marketing in magazine ads, broad sponsorships of events, billboards, yellow pages. So when I started in US law, Google was just that whole search engine optimization was just starting. So in the early days, saw it coming and I got really aggressive in digital SEO and content creation. And I got them away from magazine advertising and got them all into digital, got rid of the yellow page ads. And the angle I took also with the law firms was in creating partnerships where it looked like we were. So that made us part of the community, not just selling law services, right? Like not just that. We're lawyers over here. My goal was let's immerse us in the community and make us part of the community and contribute to the community and to more community-driven events. And that is what I did. So aggressive digital and aggressive community.
And that serves you well going into Web3. That's, almost solely based on community for like when you think about things like NFT and other crypto projects, it's largely driven by community. Do you think the law firms today have done a great job of, you started them off 20 years ago, but we're seeing even the crypto focused law firms, they're still quite conservative with the content that they put out. Their marketing seems a little bit, do you think that they could do more? Should they be hiring you again today to kind of help them, transition into this Web3 phase of creating engaging content or marketing services?
Potentially. So a lot of it is like I always say, and I know it's not a great answer. I'll say it depends. So
you can tell you work for a law firm.
Right? No, but it depends on who your target market is. If your target market is to, at the end of the day, do these small startups, do they have the money to engage with a lawyer on the scale that lawyer would want to be engaged, right? So it depends. It depends on who their target market is, right? When the thing about today and in the last few years, when it comes to marketing, a lot of companies or a lot of startups, they want to see lots of likes, lots of Twitter shares or X shares or large, Telegram channels or WhatsApp channels. And for me, I'm like, what are your KPIs? And at the end of the day, that means money. How are we making money? How are we keeping the lights on? And then let's deconstruct from there. Because as you know, Telegram, especially in cryptocurrency or Web3, when there's a token in play, a lot of times, and I'll explain this. I go, when you have a token, you're marketing to token, to investors, right? To speculators. That's not depending on the product, it depends. That's not necessarily who's going to use your product at the end of the day. There's two different audiences there in play. So understand that when you're doing a token or you're doing a token drop, there are demands from the platform doing the drop of followers, engagement, and that's one metric. And it's
And
a
let me just
false
see if I
metric.
understand. When you say there's two separate people, is it like the users, the people that are going to use the infrastructure and they're using that token for more, I don't want to use the word utility, but functionality, like to pay for fees or projects or
Right.
to launch their own apps? And then there's people like, hey, token go up, I must get in cheap and see if I can make money.
When loan,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So the when moon crowd, a lot of them just want to buy new tokens and then they drop them or they move them once that token goes on sale to the public, or they'll hodl whatever, and then they're going to sell it. They don't care about the product per se. They care about the product enough that the token's going to hold its value until they can dump the token. And then you have users that are really more interested in what can I build on this platform, or how can I use this product? And that's the more long-term, the longer roadmap, right? They're two completely different, in some cases, different audiences, right?
And to your point, I think a lot of projects focus on that audience that might be passing by versus that audience that's going to sustain the long term, which is
Correct.
probably what we saw in NFT land, right? And that's why those prices go down, because when everyone's pumping your token until they're not making money, and then when they leave that community of 10,000 people in Discord, well, who's going to take it to that next iteration? And not a lot of projects, as you said, they weren't marketing to the audience that wanted to build. They were marketing to the audience that want to buy, right?
Right.
And usually luxury things.
And that's normal in what we say the real world. It's normal in the real world too. It's like you could hold Tesla stock and never touch a Tesla car and never have a desire to own a Tesla, but you'll write out the stock as much as you can, and then you'll dump the stock when you no longer think it's gonna grow. So it's
I
the
think this
same.
helps a lot of people too, because as you said, it applies to traditional marketing. This is educational. And speaking of education, you have been part of CryptoChicks, I think, since the start. Maybe tell people what CryptoChicks is. It feels like a Canadian base. I didn't know they had such an international, stakehold in, educating, getting women into the space of that. I assuming Bitcoin early, now the broader crypto, Web3, and AI. But give people like the Coles notes of what CryptoChicks is, and maybe your involvement there.
So CryptoChicks started kind of with Ethereum. So obviously, Bitcoin and then Ethereum came because one of the founders of CryptoChicks is Vitalik Buterin's mother. Correct. So, and it hatched in Toronto, and the name actually, so the two founders are from Russia, and chicks to them, because I know you asked me about the name, and yes, we've had, the eye raised because of the name. But when you look at the branding collateral, it was actually for hatchlings. Like, it's a cute little cartoon character, and they were thinking chicks, like little, chicks, cute little, not girls on YouTube shilling Bitcoin, but and the whole intent in the beginning was to teach women and youth how to get into crypto, how to start working with digital wallets and getting into the space. And then it became this big educational hub for women and youth. And it's crossed over. Like, it's not just women, there's lots of men at our events. and it's become a hatchery. And some, like Métis, which is a layer 2, a very successful layer 2, came through the hatchery. So yeah, we have chapters all over the world, and it's for educational content, hackathons, and empowerment. And even during COVID, we teamed up with the federal government of Canada to create emerging tech education for women entrepreneurs. And as of late, the last couple of years, we've been working with the government also on gap education and emerging tech. As you know, technology moves faster than education.
Educate. Yeah.
So CryptoChicks put together an education program for high school students on, using AI, building apps with no coding experience, building websites with no coding experience, learning about digital assets, Bitcoin, and that sort of thing. To bridge
I love
that.
it.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, I don't think it had a negative connotation because, as I said, you made a perfect point. One, you're a great marketer, so you're using the word like how do you understand the deep concepts. And two, I think if anyone saw or been to an event, there was never like, knee-high saw. There was never that kind of, it was like
No.
all about education, all about, you said around the world, is there any emerging markets like we're seeing Brazil, Nigeria, India, they're topping the list of crypto adoption according to the Chainalysis report that I just saw drop yesterday. Is there any emerging market that you see where people are like, hey, we need a chapter here, or, we need more education? Have you seen anything? I know you're more on the marketing side, but is there anything that you've seen, maybe an uptick in demand or, reach out?
Latin America. In Latin America, big emerging market. I've put on events in Panama City. The energy and the innovation happening there is just incredible. And they aim to be the gateway for Latin America into the West and other markets. So it's very exciting. I mean, India's been in crypto for a long time, and that it just fluctuates based off the regulation coming down from the government, right?
That's super interesting. Shifting to Bloomly, which I feel is like your baby there. It's an NFT platform that allows you pretty much to open up an NFT storefront from scratch. Like, when did you kind of think that, like, hey, companies need, I know we're in a little bit of a lull when it comes to the NFT marketplace. Walk me through the gaps that you were trying to fill when you built Bloomly.
So, the gap is basically the high cost to get into it. When I think even initially when Bored Apes Yacht Club took off and everybody wanted to do an NFT drop, I think even just to get the artwork was commanding a price of $15,000, and then trying to find a developer or a platform that was consistent where you could launch, these marketplaces. And the tech company behind Bloomly was being asked to build these platforms for enterprise. And so we just thought, we might as well, why don't we just build a platform where it would be really easy for somebody to launch an NFT platform? And a lot of it is timing. So I'm noticing, so we're doing a lot of work right now in not so much in the art or the retail side, because I do believe there's a big use case and future for NFTs in supply chain, in carbon credits, in more, and more corporate or more company kind of driven use cases as the art and the JPEG and that whole side. Music, I think there's a big use case for it in music, and so we've been focusing predominantly right now on carbon credits. We are building carbon credit marketplaces for some of the largest companies in the world, and that's very exciting. And that started years ago, like not years ago, but a few years ago, and it's just starting to catch its legs. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just starting to catch.
Can you walk us through the carbon credit scenario? Because I think that's the most fascinating to me. In my head, like carbon credits is like, hey, you only can produce so much carbon from your manufacturing. Some companies are like, hey, we produce less, so let's sell the excess that we do to other companies. Some don't even like that practice. But explain like where the NFT technology would come in to kind of better assist this. Are you a marketplace if I'm a manufacturer, or you mentioned before this podcast, other entities are doing great jobs to reduce their carbon credit and may have excess credits. Is that kind of what you're doing, matching people that have excess to people
So,
that, need more?
so there's carbon offsetting and carbon insetting. So
Okay.
carbon offsetting is where like maybe it's a big oil company and they need to buy because their carbon footprint's not great, and they need to buy carbon credits from a third party company, right? So they buy carbon credits from somebody else that is, whether they're generating carbon credits from nature, mangroves, or whatever, or if they're buying it from energy production like solar panels, wind turbines, whatever. And they buy it to offset what they're doing or
Right.
burning. Carbon insetting is where you set it up within your supply chain. So you are incentivizing everybody in your supply chain to kind of contribute to this whole initiative. And then so that where blockchain and NFTs come in is there's a lot of greenwashing in the current carbon credit marketplaces. Greenwashing means like a lot of fraud. There's just a
Yeah.
lot of fraud. And so what blockchain and NFTs, how they contribute is obviously the blockchain for transparency. And what we're doing is basically putting units of carbon into package the NFTs. And then once it's claimed, or whatever the proper terminology, once it's claimed, then it gets burnt.
Okay.
And that will all be tracked. And that's to prevent greenwashing and fraud.
Interesting. What technology are you using? Like, what blockchains are you using to constitute this? And is this why companies came to you? Because there's like so many different service providers. You have to use one to set the technology, two to do the marketplace, three to handle financial transactions.
Right now, we're currently built on Flow. And we're
Okay.
built on Flow because it's efficiency and it's the gas fees are incredibly low, or the fees are incredibly low. Thankfully, Flow is just bridging to the EVM, right, to Ethereum.
And just to confirm, Flow is the Dapper Labs that they used to have,
Yes.
like the NFT top,
Yeah.
the NBA Top Shop and other NFT projects.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we built on Flow for the, security and the scalability and cost. However, depending on the project, there's options to build on other chains, right? So a lot of it would depend on who's coming to us and where they want to be.
Awesome. On your website, your functionality stages, which is interesting, show you the different phases of like the idea of the NFT, launching it, maintaining it, advertising it. Where do some of these big companies that have a lot of capital, where are they struggling within the process? Or where do you even find, as the builder of these kind of phases for companies, where's the bottleneck, or where's the most challenging part of this process?
Well, I think they don't know where NFTs would fit in there. Again, depending. So in regards to carbon credits, it's fairly straightforward, right? They have, this is what we need. We need transparency. We need to be able to show that the carbon credits have been burnt once they've been purchased, blah, blah, blah. And so that's a clear cut, they have a real world problem, and the technology solves that problem. The issue with, a lot of people want to do NFTs, but they don't know why. And that's a problem. And they come to you and they try, and we've been approached by companies, well, we want to do an NFT. And then they tell you, and it's like, well, and then they look to you for the answer as to why. And it's like, well, we can't, like, you need to know your why. It's a product like any other product. And one of the things I ask people is, explain to me your goals or your products without using technology. What problem are you solving without using technology? Like,
Where do you think the biggest demand comes from? Is it like, hey, we want to be cutting edge and be in this new Web3 conversation? Is it like, hey, somebody just made $10 million for doodling for doodling digitally? We want to get, like, where do you see a lot of people coming to you with, we want to add NFTs, but they don't know why?
But they don't know why. And then there's, a lot of people don't understand the marketing arc and the cost of marketing. And they think that, by saying NFT, it's automatically just going to blow up. And it's like anything. It's like you need a go-to-market plan, and you need to have a why, and it needs to make sense. And you need to have the budget then to push that, narrative forward. As you know, in tokenization or NFTs, people are like, oh, this is a way to make a lot of money or to do a raise. And it's like, well, it doesn't change anything. You still need a why, a what. Why do I care? Like,
Because they could end up spending just as much as they make if if they don't know what they're doing. They're just going to spend a lot of money in the technology and not really get the return, except for 10,000 unhappy people that are unhappy with now their corporation or their entire product suite.
yeah, no, it's got to make sense, right? And I'll even, on the tokenization front, I'll even ask why do you need a token? Because to me, a token adds a layer, right? So
Right.
you need to have a reason for that additional layer, right? It's an additional hoops you're putting people through. And it could be great. There's lots of great use cases, obviously, for tokenization. But I remember one project early on in the space, and they approached me and they were like, so we want to raise millions, 20 million from a token. And it will allow token holders they wanted to build this body scan. Do you know what I mean? A body scan.
Like a DEXA scan?
But it would be brick and mortar, like a brick and mortar.
Right.
And they wanted to set these shops up, and the whole idea was very cheap, like a very cost cutter, but full body scan. And I'm like, well, how does that scale? How do you scale renting? Two things. How do you scale renting a brick and mortar and you're only charging, even if it's $200, the cost of operating that brick and mortar? And then you have to have a doctor there. So in Western markets, you have to have a doctor, right? You
Right.
can't just, hey, like hire somebody at minimum
From the
wage.
CNE that's
you
doing
can't,
yesterday
right?
the CNE to come in and press the button.
And then you're adding that additional layer of a token.
Right.
So
With no infrastructure, no governance.
how long have you been in the space?
Since about 2016, actively.
Do you remember there was a video? I don't remember who did a video, and it was a great video, and it was about the lemonade stand in the middle of the desert.
No.
So there's a lemonade in the middle of the desert, and this guy comes and he's dying and he needs, a drink, but the person there is saying, but you need to have our token, right? So you need to have our token to buy the lemonade. And he's like, well, how do I get a token? Well, you have to download a wallet, and then you have to move your currency into the wallet, and then you have to da-da-da-da-da. And then they I don't know if they mentioned Doge or whatever, and then he holds up a dog, and he's like, well, does this work? Right? And to me, it was a beautiful video showing exactly what you're doing by adding that layer, unless it makes sense. And so I'm all about, let's make sense. Let's talk about and strategize around the best technology that suits what it is you're trying to achieve, how you're trying to, create efficiencies or change the world or whatever it is, right?
Can you walk us through your most popular use case? You don't have to mention the company name. You can give basic vagueness, like a fintech or a crypto company. But walk us through the use case that you when you're trying to attract business, you use this as the use case. Like, hey, this is what this company came to us. This is what we did. This is the results of this. Can you walk us through maybe a quick case study of something that's been extremely successful for you?
So that's so broad, right? So carbon credits, like I mentioned, we're working with a carbon credit company based out of Canada on creating these marketplaces and the tech behind, their outreach. They've signed contracts with Sierra Leone. They have IKEA, Walmart. One of the biggest companies in the world is onboarding, and a really big festival, which is very exciting. And that's in the carbon credit market, the carbon credits silo. The tokenization of real estate, I think, is an amazing use case. That is starting to catch legs. Regulation is hopefully coming in soon to Ontario and to Canada in regards to the marketplaces and tokenization.
What is an ideal real estate like when you think of it? I've heard so many concepts like, hey, what if you could own the piece of the Eiffel Tower or, the big buildings in New York? What is, maybe a more common use case when you think of real estate? What's the common use case you think of?
So one is big. I don't know if the Eiffel Tower is actually, I don't know if anyone owns or if that's government. You know what I mean? I don't know who owns or operates the Eiffel Tower, so I can't comment on that. But if you're, a contractor or a big commercial real estate development firm and you want to raise funds, um, and that's a global way to do it, right? So the Hilton actually raised through tokenization in Ecuador, I believe, for a new hotel. And I think that's a great use case in raising funds for those large developments where, currently if you invest in a large, you invest in a real estate development project, there's no liquidity until it's sold, right?
Right.
So tokenization brings liquidity to the
True.
investors because they can just sell their tokens if they want to get out, right?
And
A company that I love, Vesta Equity. Vesta Equity has launched in the United States, fully compliant with the SEC, and they offer, my simplistic explanation of it, it's like a reverse mortgage product for homeowners. So what happens is that the homeowner can take liquidity or can get money out of their house without having to deal with a bank and paying a high interest rate. So the homeowner contracts with the platform. The platform performs. There's a physical inspection done of the property. An agreement is made between the homeowner and the platform on the value of the house, right? So they agree to the value of the house. Say it's $1 million in Phoenix, Arizona, and that homeowner wants 200,000 USD out of it. Then they come to an agreement with the platform, and then that 200,000 liquidity is tokenized and put up on the platform, and token holders or members of that platform can go and they can invest by buying those tokens. So they can invest in the Phoenix real estate market or the Los Angeles real estate markets, and they can buy the tokens in that Phoenix, Arizona home. The homeowner gets the $200,000,
right.
right? And the token holders can sell or hold just like
And
any other.
that's interesting because if you couldn't afford one home in Phoenix, but you're like, hey, this whole subdivision or this particular, you can now take out small, investments in all of these homes in whole neighborhood, which you can't do in traditional finance, which is super interesting. And I think there's probably going to be that novelty if like Michael Jordan's house goes up for sale. How interesting would it be to like kind of own part of Michael Jordan's, estate? And I think
Right.
there's going to be interesting use cases there as
And
well.
they don't actually, the token holders have no hold on that home, right? The platform does,
Right.
not the token. It's much
Oh,
like
okay.
if you buy stocks on Charles Schwab, you actually do not have a hold on GM or Tesla. You just hold a piece, you know what I mean? And you sell
Right.
it to make a profit, or you sell it and you take a loss. And as a homeowner, to not have to go through the grueling, banking, the whole process.
Yeah.
And then, if the value of real estate drops, then the token holder can buy those tokens back,
Right.
right? If they have the money to
Interesting.
do so. And I think it's great. And then what happens once the house is on chain, right? So once the house is on chain, there's an AI program that constantly evaluates the value of that home. So once you have the tokens, the market now is dictated by AI, right? So much like the stock market, it's not like you're calling a realtor to do an appraisal and then you're going to
Right.
sell your 10 tokens. It's all going to be automated on the platform.
With that in place, do you think that's where we're going to? Instead of using real estate agents, we just, people just sell their house to these platforms and
But they
whatever the
don't sell their
market
house.
would, well, not
They
sell, but like, no, I mean, like, could we get into that level where like, hey, you want to sell a house, but you don't want to deal with the real estate agents or pay the real estate fees? The marketplace kind of absorbs that house, and whatever the token holders would give to that house, you ended up paying because it's giving you like a market, kind of almost like a market price
That's
for your house.
different because then you're becoming a management platform. So,
Right.
and then who does the physical inspection? Who actually owns the
True.
house? Who?
Awesome.
So I think that's a completely different,
Yeah, my mind goes to the
completely different product. But yeah, these are just, I mean, you still, even if you were to get a bunch of people and tokenize to buy a house, somebody still has to give
the,
identification
the deed. Yeah,
and
I will.
sign papers. And yeah, there's still a real world, the real world still happens there, right? But
You,
what a
you
great,
mentioned K. Sorry, Red.
Oh no, just to leave off on the real estate, what, with rising interest rates and people that aren't going to be able to afford to renew their mortgages, what an option. What an amazing option, right? For a homeowner to, now you can, if you can't renew your mortgage or your payment's going to be too high when you renegotiate with the bank, tokenize, take that money, pay off your mortgage, and don't deal with the bank.
Awesome. You have KYC integration. I'm a compliance, crypto compliance person. So can you walk us through like what is this KYC integration? Because when people think NFTs, they usually think, more decentralized. I'm assuming the integration is something the platform can turn on and off at any time, but maybe that's something that you can educate us about. Like what's the KYC process, especially when you're dealing with some of the biggest companies around the world launching their own NFT projects.
Well, so KYC, especially in the carbon, that's going to be really important, right? Obviously, in the carbon credits, like, and with the companies we're dealing with, they're not worried about decentralization. They in fact want centralization, right? So again, it's one of those, why do you need, decentralization? Are you just saying you're decentralized and you're really not? That happens a lot, right? And or do you need KYC and AML or anti-money laundering documentation, right? So it all depends. Again, it's KYC is at some point there's onboarding and offboarding, right?
Yeah.
So at some point when you move your money online, whether you're moving it through your bank, right? Think about it. There's some gateway somewhere that knows who you are, right? That's KYC. So for us, it's regulatory, and again, it's project by project on whether
Right.
they need to do KYC or not. I would assume even on some level, most projects would want to know who they're dealing with.
Right.
But then you can move it into decentralized, completely decentralized. Like
That's awesome. Now, with the time we have left, you're an experienced marketer. We have a lot of payments, tech, crypto, entrepreneurs listening to us. So maybe let's get into some strategies, advice from like an expert marketer in the space. We've seen organic content, I think, make a comeback. There's always cycles in marketing. We're seeing organic content and AI kind of making a comeback. What are your thoughts on that? What are some marketing trends that you see that maybe companies should think about instilling in their plan?
So definitely content, right? Now, short form content. And again, I will say it depends. So, a lot of people will say Facebook. Do I need Facebook anymore? It's like, it depends. Facebook's really big in Asia. It's really big in Vietnam. Is your target market people, say over the age of 50, then they're still on Facebook. They're not on TikTok, right? Are you going after traditional investors? Well, I'm going to find more traditional investors on Facebook than I am on TikTok.
Interesting.
But on LinkedIn, more, you know what I mean? So it depends. So if you're talking about, the community and gamers, younger digital natives, crypto natives, then, are you talking about Discord, Reddit, I said TikTok, right? Reddit,
Yeah.
X. So again, I will ask you when you come to me, at the end of the day, how do you make money? How do you make money? Then let's deconstruct from there and figure out where those people are. Are you selling to banks? Are you selling to institutions? Are you going after traditional investors that now might be branching into digital assets, ETFs, ETPs, whatever that is? Because somebody that's buying meme coins on Solana really interested in buying a digital asset product from JP Morgan Chase? They're completely different. So you still content, especially, if it's younger people, shorter form content, TikTok type videos, right? Really short, really punchy and straight to the point. For SEO purposes, and I find a lot of startups, there's long term, which is where SEO comes in. If you plan to be around for a long period of time, right, or you need to educate people on process, then long form content is really, really important on your own channel. So YouTube educational content. Some people like to read, so piggyback that with Medium or, your own on your website or whatever, or in a white paper. Or I'm currently researching a new project that's going to launch soon, and I can't find very good educational content on what it is and what it does.
Right.
And I can find YouTube shillers talking about it, but I can't find anything that I think is a legitimate source. So to me, again, it's like, what's your end game? How are you making money? What's your goal? Is your goal to exit? Is your goal to sell to? Right? Are you going to sell to JP Morgan Chase, or what's the goal? And then you build strategies aiming for those goals.
Right. You mentioned KPIs and metrics, obviously very important, especially if you're marketing for any product or services. But we also see a lot of fluff with some of these numbers and the impressions are inflated. What are some KPIs and metrics that have served you? I know it depends on a number of different factors, but what are some of the interesting KPIs that's like a staple every time you go to the go-to-market strategy? You're like, we have to measure these 2 or 3 things to make sure at least we're going in the right direction.
So it depends. You tired of that answer? So again, it depends. Again, for me, most businesses need to make money. But when you're talking about emerging tech, sometimes they don't know what that looks like yet because it's so new. So, for example, if you're there are some environment or energy projects that they don't know how they're going to scale yet. So if I'm consulting with them, I'm like, okay, so you're going for research and development loans. You're going for, because you don't have a roadmap to $1 million yet, right?
Right.
Like, how are you going to scale? Some cases are clear cut. We're going to onboard 10 customers equals X amount of dollars. Do you get what I'm saying?
Right.
Whereas some, like commercial real estate and carbon credits is a good example of that. Is what are the numbers and how many buildings in a 5-mile radius have to be on that grid in order to create X amount of carbon credits to make it worthwhile? At what point does scale happen? Does that make sense?
It,
So KPIs, again, it's how do you make, to me, the most important KPI is how do you make money? That's the most important KPI. How do you make money? So is that 10 family offices launching a digital asset financial product? Is that, then how do we get to that 10? Or is it 5,000 people onboarding onto your SaaS platform? Then how do we get that 5,000? And where are we finding them? Then if it's LinkedIn, I'll use LinkedIn as an example. If we find LinkedIn is the sales channel, then how much are we spending to get 50,000 leads or 5,000 leads? And then what does that equate into signed contracts or subscriptions signed up? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Do you find, you probably know this more, we just came from a conference, Futures Blockchain Conference, the best Web3 conference and the biggest in Canada, and now moving, around the world,
Miami.
starting in the United States, which is, I think we're all excited for Miami next year. I ask that question a lot because I think that tells me a lot about what the person's focus is, what their intent is in the conversation. Do you find not a lot of companies can answer that question when you ask them, like, how do you make money? Does that throw them off? Similar to you ask them, why do you need an NFT platform? They're kind of like, oh, I don't know. You tell me. Do you get the same response when you're asking companies, like, how do they make their money?
It depends on the size of the company. So an established company, and say the startup's been around for 5 years or 3 years, then they're going to be able to tell you, at the end of the day, it's subscriptions or it's a platform onboarding fee and then seats. They're going to be able to tell you that. It's usually early startups that are still trying to figure out, their roadmap and how, are they going after a SaaS or is it retail? Is it B2B? So I find where more education is needed is in the KPIs, because they'll be like, well, we don't, again, like I'll use X as an example, because in Web3, X used to be really important.
Right.
It's dwindling, but it used to be really important. And they'll be like, well, we need 10,000 followers. And this is where I'll be like, what's your budget? Because do you want 10,000 followers, we can do meme contests, giveaways, that sort of thing. Because I believe, again, it depends on your product. If I would rather you have 2,000 followers that are users instead of 10,000
and they're engaged in actually
followers,
what you would have to do or want to say.
right? 10,000 followers that aren't engaged and they're just following you because you gave away, you did a meme coin contest or you did a meme, you know what I mean? Like, if we have to prop up numbers really fast for marketing purposes or for a token drop, then you can do those balloon following type exercises. But if you want actual users, then it's more of an organic and it's a slower process, but then at least you're onboarding real engaged users.
In 2018, you wrote an article actually about how important hackathons are to like a marketing overall strategy. I know you're going to say it depends. So I'm going to say, what was your concept around that? Like, explain to us why you thought marketing hackathons were important for marketing. And, 6 years later, do you feel that still holds true today?
So yes, I do think it holds true to today, especially because I am in technology predominantly. So how do you show you're part of the community? How do you show you care about, the future and who's coming up in the future? And if you're a platform, or you have a set of tools for developers, then that's where they are, right? So if Ethereum has a great developer community, and a lot of that growth has been through hackathons, right? Is offering an incentive to work with these developers and entrepreneurs and getting them onto your platform to feel that they're supported, that they are part of a community, right? So it's part of that community building and showing you're in it, right? You're a part of the community.
I'm curious, we have a lot of L2 platforms that come on this show, and I'm getting well versed in it, so it's a great educational process. But they also have a very similar plan, right? They want developers to come build, they want users to come use those apps that are being built. But like, I look around, like, how many people could possibly be, developing on this platform, developing on that platform? What are your thoughts? How can these platforms stand out when they all look very similar? Or is their target audience, not me? So, the target audience knows a lot more about the differences between the platforms. But it seems like, they just give a bunch of money, grants to say, hey, come build. Is that a sustainable marketing plan? Like, does that work in L2 world from what you can see in the world of Web3?
Well, so here's the thing is this is where quality matters, right? So the community is small enough to know that if you're on a, like Solana's taken off, right? The last little while, Solana's taken off, especially with meme coins, right? But they've had a lot of outages. So the community's small enough that if do you know what I mean? We all know what the challenges are with Ethereum and why there are layer twos. So, and that's why layer twos have taken off, right? Because the speed and the cost of Ethereum, building directly on Ethereum. So word spreads. So if you're not quality, so the ones that have stuck around that you're talking about, Avalanche, Polygon, Avalanche, like Métis, that's quality speaks, volumes.
In the industry, you're 100% right. And because it's such a small industry, if you have bad quality, that information gets around pretty quickly, unfortunately. And the community is very quick at understanding, hey, this is not going to be profitable. Because a lot of them are spending their time, even if they're not spending the money, they're spending their time building on it. They're not going to spend their time there. As we close out the conversation, what are you excited about? We're going into Q4 2025. We're in this kind of uncharted territories, recovering from crypto winter. It's not exactly hot yet in the crypto scene, but it's not cold. We're not freezing either. So we're kind of in this limbo space. What are you looking forward to, whether it's Bloomly, Spinovate, your own personal projects? You're like, oh, this is interesting. I'd love to spend more time learning about this. What's going on in your world in the next 6 months?
I'm excited about RockX, Rock Carbon Labs, and Bloomly, and that's in the carbon credit marketplace. I think next year is going to be explosive in that space. Spinovate, I'm excited about the Futurist. The Futurist heading to Miami. I'm very excited for that.
And Consensus coming to Toronto. It feels like next year is going to be a playground. places
Yeah.
are coming here, we're going there. Like it's going to be a complete Canadian
Yeah.
takeover, it feels like.
And I'm through Spinovate. I am working on a couple of events that will piggyback the Futurist Conference, both conferences and consensus. And they will be hackathons. They will be developer, entrepreneur hackathon building events. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, you just keep going. I've been through crypto winters before, or, would you say we're in a winter right now? I don't think we're in a.
No, I said it's not cold, but it's not exactly hot. The money's
Yeah.
not flying, but we're not. I think we've evolved from ramen noodles and baked beans for the most part as well.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? I had this, something interesting came to my head, and now I can't even remember what I was gonna say for the first time in this conversation. But I wanted to kind of go through, where do you see us fitting in? And like when you're saying you're excited about a project, where do you see us fitting in for like Canada? Like, consensus is coming here next year. We finally have our first blockchain or, crypto newsletter. Blockchain North is really showing that we can have our own media company here in Canada. We're seeing futurists expand to other countries, including the US. What are your thoughts about where Canada is in the global blockchain ecosystem? You, as a marketing perspective, you probably see a lot of interested projects from other countries. Where do you think Canada sits right now?
Unfortunately, I don't think Canada is very ahead. I think Canada is very slow for regulating the space. Unfortunately, in the current climate, I see more attractive destinations elsewhere.
Is there any destinations in mind? Like when you say that, what's the first one that popped in your mind?
Panama, Asia, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, like there's just, even Europe, it's just, there's just more room for innovation. And it's like, there is innovation here. There's a great community here, but a lot of our conversation, unfortunately, is around where do we go
Right.
to get out of this stifling atmosphere in Canada.
It's interesting. It's like almost like a race, right? Like a car race. Like as long as you put the guardrails up, you know exactly the course, to go around, and you can go fast. When there are no guardrails and there is no track, that's what Canada feels like. Like, are we, are we on the path? Are we like in a ditch somewhere? You don't always know exactly where those guardrails are. The question I wanted to ask you before, and you with saying that we're not ahead, what about the projects that you're working? Like when you say carbon credits, is it important to be first? I think a lot of people are like, hey, AI and blockchain, I have to be the first in the sector. Real estate and blockchain, I have to be the first. Is it important to be first? Or is there still just like, in any industry, there's still room for best?
Well, so look, Google wasn't the first search engine, right? So, is be the best. So here's what I say is if you're aiming to be the best, just be the best. Because obviously the first to market, so a lot of times they have growing pains, and then a company can come up behind them and see exactly where the gaps are and then just take them out, right? So there's that. So I think from marketing, there's a lot of benefits of being first. And this is where I would be aggressive with a company that hired me. I would be like, we're flooding SEO because you're first. So we have to make sure you're dominant in that search, right? Like we want to make sure you're dominant. So we're going to throw up content. Like we're just going to blitz it and hit it from every SEO. But that also includes social media, YouTube, and that short form content, long form content. We're blitzing. And then obviously if you're second, then what you're going to promote is quality. And now I always say, a lot of projects think they're the top quality, but they're not. And I'll say there's nothing wrong with being Walmart. Walmart is incredibly successful. It's one of the most successful companies in existence. And it's like, they never claim that they're quality, right? Walmart is not
but they're
quality.
Convenient, and people, what you realize is people prefer convenience over quality a lot of it.
So it's knowing who your product is and who your target market is. And there's nothing wrong with being Walmart, but know your Walmart. Don't claim you're Apple when you're Walmart, right?
I love that example. I think that helps.
And there's nothing wrong again. Oh, like you want to give me Walmart? I'll take it. Are they adopting anybody? Hey, there's nothing wrong with Walmart.
do you find, and you're a marketer, do you find organizations, companies, when they're getting into the space, they try to coin a certain term that can be used as like, so that if they coin the term and people start using it, then they're automatically kind of like the thought leader, because like a lot of their content is around this term. You notice that? I feel in Web3, people are always trying to coin a certain term or a phrase to try and get the eyeballs towards them, or is that just me thinking too much?
No, I see that a lot. And it's so funny because I'll look at somebody, they'll come to me with their marketing collateral, right? And it's like, well, what do you do? Do you get, like, I'll get this in outreach emails, and they'll send an email, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't even know what you do. Like, I'm reading 3 paragraphs and I still have no clue.
They just have all the buzzwords, right? Blockchain infrastructure, developing.
Right? Well, I don't know what you are. And if I don't know what you are, nobody knows what you are. So get to the point, and what is it that you do? Then add your flowery language, right? But do it selectively. And I only think you have to balance that. Hey, we're going to try and coin some term with nobody knows what you do. Like, you're being too creative.
You're being too cutesy. Too cutesy.
I have, like, a big term I see all the time is efficiencies. We streamline efficiencies. How?
Which one?
What?
Which one?
What do you like? What? Like, I don't know what you do.
I love it.
And if you can't explain it to me without,
who's deep in the industry, right? That's why I always say to people, we work with companies that like are misrepresenting the market. I'm like, if I don't know who you are or what you're doing, that's a big red flag, because I'm pretty deep. I might not be the deepest, but I'm pretty deep. You're not getting nearly the market you think you are if I don't even have a good idea of what you're doing.
And to me, it's some pretty simple things. And like, I'll give you a fun example is because I've been in marketing a long time, how frustrating is it when you go to a restaurant's website and you can't find their phone number?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, you're a takeout place. I can't find your phone number.
Or I can't click on it and call it right away. Like those ones where they have the phone number, but you can't click on it directly from your phone.
Why
and call it. It's like, I'm not going to dial your number.
Yeah, it's just like, what is your call to action? And again, that's back to your KPI discussion is what are the KPIs? How is it, like, B2C, it should be fairly quick. Click here and buy it, right? B2C, it's got to be fairly like fast and furious, and your KPIs obviously are going to be a higher number. Whereas if you're institutional or traditional finance, the sales cycle's longer and you need more educational content. Your content has to be more strategic and thought out, right? Well, it all has to be strategic and thought out. But, if you're selling, as corporations have a longer sales cycle, and you have to touch, various different people at different levels. And how are you communicating that? So especially when, in small companies, the marketing person and the CEO could be the same person. Bigger companies, it's not the case, right? So how do you start that conversation and seep your product into their space? So
I think that is the best advice. That's worked well with me. It's like, hey, I'm not just trying to reach after the person that's going to be the decision maker. I want everyone, I'm giving ideas to everyone within that company so people can start putting the puzzle pieces together internally. And then they're like, oh yeah, that's the person that can do this, that. And, speaking of streamlining efficiencies, that's the person that touches all these things that we're talking about. Audrey, this is the perfect place to end. You've been an absolute amazing guest, and I can't wait to see you in Miami next year and in Toronto next year, so we can, get through some of the events that you're working on. Thank you so much for joining our road trip to Miami.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.